G'day mate, 40 here. It's Friday morning, 11:43 a.m. here in Sydney, Australia. And I've been watching a lot of the World Cup, thinking about some of its application to politics. So for example, I read a book on Barcelona Football Club and how between about 2006 and 2012 it was the greatest football club in the world, and it was built around Lionel Messi, who this author Simon Cooper, K-U-P-E-R, posits is the greatest football player of the past 30 years. He says he's better than Cristiano Ronaldo, because while they're both equally good at scoring goals, that Lionel Messi is more of a creator. So he creates opportunities for other people. Anyway, Barcelona Football Club became incredibly successful, built around Lionel Messi. He ends up making about $50 million a year playing for Barcelona. And then his salary became too much, and as he aged, having the whole team style built around him, didn't work out so well. So I'm thinking about how this is kind of similar to the Trump movement. All right. So right now it looks like, honestly, for the past 2 years, that the Trump movement would be better off without Donald Trump. So perhaps retain the immigration restriction, retain free trade, but maybe Donald Trump, the person, like Lionel Messi, the person, no longer good for the club. So Richard Spencer had some hilarious ideas on this. So he called Nick Fuentes white ISIS, which is pretty funny. So you can be skeptical of modernity, all right? You can not sign on with 100% with the Enlightenment. So for example, the Enlightenment held that people are basically good. And so I think if you're watching this stream, you'd agree people aren't basically good. So you can be skeptical of parts of the Enlightenment, you can be skeptical of large swaths of modernity, and not really be with ISIS. But it is like hilarious, Richard Spencer describing the Nick Fuentes and Kanye West movement as essentially white ISIS. I mean, that is compelling. That is funny. That grabs my attention.
He saw all that temptation and was actively trying to destroy it. So, I think these are real ways that you can address a situation that's actually quite common in history.
So Richard's talking about the incel phenomenon.
Anyway, what do you guys think about that? This kind of gets at the trad revival thing that I was...
Right, so if you're not spending your energy and your love and your passion with your spouse, your girlfriend, or your family, then it opens up that energy for different directions. Forget Messi, the GOAT. 40 is the goal, the greatest of all live streamers. So I'm reading this book on Barcelona Football Club, and here's the name of the book, The Barcelona Complex. Lionel Messi and the making and unmaking of the world's greatest soccer club. And the author Simon Cooper makes the point, think about how much joy and happiness Lionel Messi has brought to probably millions of people just love to watch him play. And so, yeah, think about the joy and happiness I've brought to dozens of people who just enjoy watching me live stream. So there's some really good lines in this book. And one, yeah, let's pause for a moment and think of what Messi does for global happiness. He's made our lives richer than they would have been without it. And kind of the similar phenomenon with Donald Trump. And then I think for many people who've been able to use Nick Fuentes and Richard Spencer and many of the other alt-right streamers for entertainment purposes only, didn't destroy their lives with the alt-right, but just enjoyed the human drama, enjoyed the conflict with the mainstream media. All right, it's made thousands of lives richer and more fun. Now, on the other hand, some people couldn't handle it. Some people took it too seriously. so Donald Trump is not a good loser, right? And so if you took him literally that the 2020 election was stolen, right? If you took many of the things literally, yeah, you'd be very likely to totally screw up your life. But if you're able to enjoy the human drama of Donald Trump or the alt-right or the alt-light or Gavin McGuinness without destroying your life, you're able to enjoy Kanye West and Nick Fuentes and Milo, right? Just enjoy the human drama, then you're better off for it, all right? So we live in the age of messy, or we live in the age of live streaming. It often feels like the best way to spend this time is to watch, right? This is a whole new medium. So whether your entertainment is soccer or your entertainment is true crime documentaries, but live streaming offers the opportunity to become a prosumer. So this is someone who's both a producer and a consumer. So Glib Medley, right? He consumes live streams, but he also produces content. He is amazing with his comments. Live streaming is messy, messy is live. So if you're watching this live stream or listening to playback as a podcast, you're not just a consumer. You're also a producer of content, right? I am reacting to you, right? I had second thoughts about doing this live stream because I wanted to really record my thoughts on DJI Pocket 2, which gives far superior technical quality and far superior sound quality. The problem is I can't do it live on that medium. And so I am foregoing good technical quality in both sound and picture so they can have the live interaction, right? So we can kick it back and forth, right? If you're watching this, you're not a consumer. Guys, you're a prosumer. You're a producer. And I am also a prosumer because I am producing content, but I am also consuming your content in the chat. So there's this one guy who struggled with mental health for years to try to catch up and watch every match that Messi played for Barcelona, because watching Lionel Messi had a therapeutic quality. He's an accessible genius, and so too with live streamers. I think for some people it can improve your mental health because it provides an outlet for laughter and for human connection. Even opposing players say they're surprised to find themselves watching him leaving the match, becoming a spectator. So sociability, right, that's a large part of why we support a team and why we support politicians and movements and live streamers, right? It creates a community. It's a form of expression. You're communicating as much as if you're making love to somebody. Blessings to Elliot Blatt, right? See, Elliot Blatt, another guy, he's not just a consumer of live streams. He also produces great content. I mean, that was an amazing show. Is it just me? Or the show that we did Sunday, I think Australia time, Saturday American time, where Elliot Blatt came on for about an hour. And I mean, that was great quality content there, Elliot Blatt. I think that's my favorite live stream with you. All right? So if you are just knocking a ball between you, all right, a relationship develops between you. But if you're just live streaming with someone, yeah, what's up, Tim Humphreys? It was a quality live stream. That 40 shares his vulnerabilities with his audience the way soccer players share their pains with the referee. That was just a fantastic stream on Sunday, Elliot. And so we develop connection as we just kick this stream back and forth, right? Or if we go marching together, we go bushwalking together, or we go to church together, or go to synagogue together, or eat a meal together, or if you're just knocking a ball back and forth, you develop a relationship, right? It's a form of expression. It's like making love to someone, right? If you work together on the football field, you get to know each other intimately, right? You exchange commentary on a live stream, you get to know each other intimately. You build up a close relationship. Like, I've never met Elliot Platt, but we're like brothers, right? We come on here, we're resolving problems together, we're creating situations and drama and comedy and content and political analysis and personal analysis and cultural analysis together, just like if you're two soccer players trying to create goals together, right? This is not an unspoken relationship, but when you're playing soccer or basketball together, your movements speak and your game speaks and your passes speak. Right? The kind of passes that you give each other, right? The kind of situations you set up together, they speak for you. Right? You develop a close unspoken understanding. Our understanding is much more spoken. So a coach has to seduce his players into accepting his ideas. Right? Professional coaches deal with professional players who are frequently getting paid much more money than him, frequently have much more power than him. And so how do you get them on the same, how do you get your players on the same table? You have to seduce them. Same with making a live stream, right? The more ostensibly, deliberately, provocatively, outspokenly I try to change your mind, that's never going to work. Right? The successful live streamer has to seduce his audience. Right? So seduction implies a relationship of equals. Right? That's what we have going on here. So the contemporary sports coach, professional sports coach, is much more a film director than a military general. So too the live streamer, he's not really a military general. Yeah, if not seduce, at least engage. Right? Authoritarian rule does not really generally work out for live streams or for being a professional football coach. Okay, here's an insight from a professional anti-racism campaigner, former French football player, Lynn Thuram. I've never met a racist person in football, and he means soccer. Maybe they were, I didn't see it. You know why? Because people who are racist tend not to know the other. In football, we share things. In football, it's harder to have discrimination because we are judged on very specific performance. Yes, journalistic horseplay is to be engaged in. So Louis van Gaal, the coach, the manager of Holland, used to coach Barcelona, and he was Dutch. And so the Dutch tend to be very direct in their speech. The Spanish tend to be much more indirect and courteous. So he was the coach of Barcelona Football Club for a couple of years, but it didn't work out because he was too direct. He tried to order his players around, and they didn't like to take orders. So in modern football, in modern sports, when the talent clashes with the club, the talent usually wins. So fans find this incomprehensible. They expect a manager to command his players like no-nonsense headmaster of a reform school for boys. But any macho coach who tries to break his players' will or tries heavy-handed motivation will prompt talent flight. Similar with a successful politician, you have to engage, right? There are rarely opportunities for just authoritarian rule. Like Donald Trump, by and large, could not just rule by fiat. He had to engage and he had to seduce. So the modern politician, the modern sports club abandons the fantasy of dominating their mobile, multinational, multimillionaire, near irreplaceable players. Right? It's a talent-driven business. Ruled by talent is inevitable. So money is the best measure of player power. So big clubs spend about 90% of their revenue on talent. This is an interesting insight here from Simon, that professional athletes have to perform at near 100% of their ability or they get replaced. So Donald Trump, politicians, they don't have to perform at near 100% of their ability day in, day out. Like Donald Trump, spent hours a day just watching the telly. France versus England should expose some ancient enmity. Yes. So the whole English and French political systems are built around being top-down, being the opposite of federalists, being corporate, and they're built to go to war with each other. Yeah. So sports is not a very useful model for business because most people in business, they can get away with giving, less than 100% effort. Right? So players have to be as close as possible to 100% of their potential to be efficient. Right? That's not the case in daily life. So Trump was the least intellectual president we've ever had, even more incurious than George W. Bush, or at least read an immoral Leonard novel now and then. Yeah. Yeah, I'm afraid that's right. So in Spanish life in general, as compared to German and Dutch life, right, there are high expectations of courtesy. So publicly telling someone off is not tolerated. So this indirectness, however, can be a problem, right? People don't take aside, some aging player and tell him it's time to go. Business provides ample opportunity for the occasional Tubin. Yeah, as long as you don't do it in front of everyone. Right? In Spain, if you have an open clash with a player, the relationship won't automatically come good again. And this may be true also for politics. Right? Trump went from known commodity to unwanted known commodity. Yeah. Once you break ties with someone in politics, very hard to rebuild. So in Spain, any criticism needs to be delivered in private, very carefully phrased. So a shrewd coach has to invest time building a relationship of trust with a player or trying to broach sensitive issues. So when Bill Parcells went down to Texas, he surprisingly called upon Quincy Carter to be a starting quarterback. And Bill Parcells invested a great deal of time in that relationship, only to have Quincy Carter kicked off the team in training camp of Parcells' second year for cocaine problems. And Quincy never made it in the NFL again. I admire much about Latino culture. Yeah, they have a code of honor and loyalty I could respect. Yeah, and a code of courtesy. Right? You can't be as blunt as you can be with the Dutch or the Germans or the Aussies. So it's interesting, professional soccer is becoming much more intense and at the same time it's becoming much more black. So high intensity running means moving at over 15 kilometers an hour has increased 30% in the English Premier League between 2006 and 2013. So the number of sprints has been rising sharply in the Champions League. So you have to be in much better physical condition to play the game. So Johan Cruyff, the most influential person in modern soccer, was a chain smoker, right? You wouldn't be able to get away with that today. All right, here, when a sport comes to be dominated by one group or race, it's always a turn off some people because it makes the game less relatable. Some people, but it hasn't significantly diminished enthusiasm for the NFL, which is approximately 80% black sport. All right, so overall, enthusiasm for the NFL is pretty close to an all-time high. So where do professional athletes get better as they age? And this is also true for the rest of us. Decision-making and pattern recognition. Right, that's the biggest difference between being 15, 25, and 35, 45, 55. Right, you make better decisions as you age, and you'll get better at pattern recognition. So I think that's, if you're listening to this show, it's probably because you've gotten significantly better at pattern recognition, and you enjoy discussing pattern recognition, and you want to share, your ideas on pattern recognition. So players over 30 have successful passes about 3 to 5% higher. Basketball used to be white and Jewish, now there are many Jewish team owners, most of the players are black. Right, but enthusiasm for the NBA is still very, very high. Okay, so people over 30, much more accurate with their passes, but 21% lower in their sprinting than younger players. So what's the difference between the professional athlete and the rest of us? One difference is they have more intensity, right? They have more of an illusion that what they're doing is a matter of life and death. So too with the successful live streaming. I think of the intensity of Nick Fuentes, Kanye West, Milo Yiannopoulos, Richard Spencer, and Andy Worski, JFRP, when they have thousands upon thousands of viewers. Right, it does make life much more intense. Right, so it seems much more that what you're doing is a matter of life and death compared to our everyday activities. So winning and losing in front of thousands and thousands of people is a much more intense experience for the successful live streamer, podcaster, politician, or athlete. So to losing in front of that many people becomes that much more intense. But you really feel like you're living. So compared to the successful live streamer, podcaster, or professional athlete, we lead low adrenaline lives. So when Neymar, Brazil's best soccer player, moved on from Barcelona Football Club to PSG in Paris, he lost a lot of his discipline. So Barcelona plays a very disciplined game that they've improved upon from Johan Cruyff, their former manager. So Neymar degenerated into someone who liked to receive the ball standing still, right? The good soccer player passes the ball to where you'll be running to, not to where you're standing still. Neymar, like many athletes like Neymar, love to taunt their opponents. So taunting is dramatically increased in the NFL, in the NBA, even in baseball since the 1950s. And I'm trying to think, why is that? Why is there so much more taunting in professional sports? Hockey is under attack for its whiteness, yeah. So why is there so much more taunting in professional sports? And why, when there's less discipline, do certain players start engaging in a lot more taunting? I feel like there's a pattern here, but I just can't quite put my finger on why sportsmanship has declined in the last few decades. And with integration, we've got a lot more taunting and a lot more disruption at school, a lot more crime, and I can't quite put my finger on why this is. So stuck in the French league, which is only about the fifth most competitive football league, Neymar is effectively retired from weekly top-class football. But don't try to call me when I'm live streaming. I'm going to have to press decline there. Yeah, football needs more excessive celebrating in the end zone. Yeah, so some of the taunting is fun to watch. Some of the excessive celebrations are fun to watch. So the WASP approach is not the only approach in life. So the most competitive soccer league is the Premier League. Then I believe it's followed by the German league. Then the Spanish league is number 3. And I believe the French league is number 4 or 5. And like the Australian soccer league would be like number 30 in the world. Oh, so Western Europe, right? They developed a style of soccer inherited from Johan Cruyff, right? You call this total football, right? It's primarily about passing the ball, and players don't have a fixed position. And so pretty much, all of Western Europe plays Johan Cruyffian football, total football, right? It means every player attacks, everyone defends. So the US played total football because they've got incredible athletes. And so they were beaten, right, by Netherlands, but they weren't out physical, right? They held their own with Netherlands. All right, so in total football, every player changes position so fluidly, it's like controlled chaos, right? Every player has to think for himself non-stop and adapt his position second by second. So it's a little bit like live streaming. So in total football or in good soccer, you don't pass the ball horizontally. Because if you pass the ball horizontally, if the defender takes it, he will now be ahead of 2 of you on your team. So you always want to be passing the ball diagonally, not to where a person is, but to where he's going. All right, that's total football. So Western Europe plays total football. United States, their national team did, but most other teams in the United States don't play total football. So in 2013, here's a hilarious story. All right, so you had a kids indoor soccer tournament in Rockville Center, New York, and there was a referee short. So one of the organizers asked the parents, does anyone know the rules of the game well enough to call a game. This Hispanic guy in a baseball cap volunteered. But it turned out he interpreted his referee role quite broadly, kept stopping the game to advise both teams on positioning. The watching parents who'd come to see their kids win grew antsy. "Come on, let them play," they shouted. The guy in the baseball cap, on sabbatical in New York after 4 draining seasons at Barcelona Football Club, was Pep Guardiola, right? The greatest soccer coach in the world. He was getting shouted at by the American parents. So Lionel Messi has stopped defending, right? And Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, right? These older players have largely stopped defending. They're just really there to create opportunities and to score goals. And it's kind of like what's happened to some of the greatest live streamers and Tucker Carlson and pundits. They quit seeking truth. Instead, they just seek to give their audience what they want to have. Can you get JF back on your channel, please? Yeah, I should send him an invite. But you see this with a lot of successful live streamers. They find out a formula that works for live streaming and for punditry and for hosting a radio show. The money is not in being right. The money is in being interesting. And so if it's interesting to be anti-vax, then you're not particularly rigorous in examining a study to see whether it replicates. It's just if it's interesting, you just seize on it. Kind of like old football players who kind of lose interest in defending. They just don't have the energy. So let's get back to a little Richard Spencer commentary here on Kanye and Ye as the new form of ISIS. I thought that's amusing, not accurate, no accuracy, but very amusing.
Interested in talking about, although it's only one aspect of it. Kanye won't be the last prominent black figure that embraces a kind of Christian National Socialism. Totally. I totally agree with that. So there's going to be in the future another prominent, it'll just increase basically, you think, slowly? Yeah. I mean, remember, a week after Kanye did his thing, Kyrie Irving followed in line. And, I don't think, certainly Kyrie Irving and Kanye West are not incels. I mean, they've been married. I don't know about Kyrie Irving's personal life. Who knows? Is there a consensus? They're not incels, but they kind of dovetail with the incel community. Is there a mainstream consensus on the theology of the Third Reich in terms of it being a Christian movement or a pagan movement?
Yeah, it was very much an anti-Christian movement, but they adapted themselves to the power that Christianity held. But Nazism was explicitly, profoundly, powerfully anti-Christian. It was very much a pagan movement. The modernism present in National Socialism, I have no doubt, I have a little doubt that he was not a Christian. The fact that Kanye, actually, I watched about 30 minutes of Kanye's talk with Gavin McInnes, and he labeled Hitler a Christian, which I definitely think is wrong. But at the same time, when I was in graduate... Gee, it sure sounds like Kanye West doesn't really know very much.
Graduate school, I remember being assigned books that were pretty interesting about kind of the Christian response to National Socialism. So this has been 15...
So whatever your ideals, even religious ideals, you still have to adapt to reality. Right? Reality is not going to bend to you, even if you're theologically correct. So yeah, the church has had to adapt to the new form of power ruling Germany, which was Nazism. 15 years at this point, I'm maybe a little hazy on the details, but I do remember the general trajectory of things. And yes, there was a kind of syncretic marriage of Hitlerism and National Socialism with Protestant and Catholic Christianity during the Third Reich. Much as there is a synthesis between... Look, Nazism never became pro-Christian except as a tactic to gain support in elections and as a tactic of unifying the country or allowing the country to find psychological comfort in difficult times. So there never was a syncretism of Christianity and Nazism.
Between American patriotism and Christianity in the United States. I mean, it's actually really not surprising at all.
It
I mean,
is
there's just
surprising.
no doubt that there's, in evangelical Christianity, it is a form of nationalism. And the flag is present. The notion of redeeming.
That is true. So, not so much in Seventh-day Adventism, but when I moved out of Seventh-day Adventism with my family after 1980, and we learned more about other evangelical Christians. Yeah, much of evangelical Christianity, is heavily nationalistic. Now, the United States is nationalistic in a way that Australia generally isn't. Like, the United States is heavily patriotic in a way that Australia generally isn't. So Christianity is incredibly flexible. Christianity can be highly nationalistic or globalist. Christianity can be, support racial identity and separation, or it can oppose it. So before the American Civil War, there was not one rabbi in the South of the United States who was spoke out publicly against slavery. So Judaism also can be incredibly flexible, right? It can situate itself within socialist regimes, within racist regimes, all sorts of different governing styles, right? Christianity and Judaism can adapt to.
Redeeming this nation, we're a Christian nation. The founders were Christian. George Washington was a devout. All of this stuff. It is just like what was going on in this Christian synthetic phenomena during the Third Reich. I'm just comparing the two. I'm not equating them, of course. And I think that's very natural. I mean, I guess you could posit it as a kind of survival strategy of Christianity, but where it kind of takes on these factors. Okay, but it's a very real.
Yeah, well, people are rarely one thing, right? It's not like people are just religious or just nationalist or just supporters of Barcelona Football Club or just husbands or just fathers, right? People are complicated. They have many different identities. They're clerks at home, at work, and at home, they may rule the roost. I was just walking past a chiropractor's office. There are a lot of chiropractors in Australia. And I think, my opinion, that it's quackery. That at best it does nothing for you, generally speaking, and at worst it does irreparable harm, causing a stroke when they adjust your neck. But this one chiropractor had a great pitch on his outside window. It was, live up to your potential. Like, who of us does not want to live up to his potential? I mean, that's just like a great pitch, because we may be doing data entry by day, but we see ourselves as stars. Now, I may be live streaming to 14 people right now, but in my heart of hearts, I think I'm totally worthy of live streaming to 14,000 people right now. The Bible shows how multicultural world governments are disastrous anyways, says the chat. So living up to your potential, isn't that a really killer advertising slogan? Because we all want to be living up to our potential. We all have vastly grander visions for our life and for our role in reality than what we've been able to make real. So living up to your potential. So a political, social, cultural, or religious movement based around living up to your potential, right? That's an incredibly successful formula.
Real thing, very natural. I think it's kind of almost unnatural when it doesn't do that. And obviously with Trump, I mean, this is the other theme that is worth talking about, where, isn't it interesting how all of these movements kind of end up as just Christianity at the end of them? So in 2015...
Well, why is it that many of these right-wing nationalist movements, identitarian movements, end up as just Christianity? Because Christianity is still more socially acceptable than a movement based around racial identity. I think that's why.
2015, Donald Trump really defined his campaign as immigration. It's about the wall. It's about protecting Americans from these criminals and rapists. It's about not getting screwed over economically by Mexico or China or so on. And that's how it started. It was actually remarkably secular. Trump never mentioned God in his announcement speech in 2015. And he also, of all the things that he was politically incorrect about, homosexuality was actually not one. He did not talk about gay marriage, which was controversial a mere 5 years before he ran. Hotly controversial. And it's almost become controversial again, interestingly, which kind of bolsters my point on this. You now have Ben Shapiro and other people, Matt Walsh, these are guys with millions of viewers and so on. They are now really going back to the gay marriage situation. And they were just outright in opposition to the recent codification of gay marriage in Congress. Interesting. But anyway, it was remarkably Trump's campaign was remarkably secular. And by the summer of 2016, things started to shift. And so he went to Liberty University and gave maybe it was a commencement address, maybe it was just a big speech. And he said, you might not like me, folks, but you've got to vote for me because of the judges. You got to vote for me, guys. And
well, Trump's most important address on this was in Iowa, where he said, if you vote for me, Christianity will have power. And he did live up to that, right? Christianity did have power. Roe v. Wade was overturned. Trump delivered on many of his campaign promises, and evangelical Christians and other Trump supporters had their reasons for supporting Trump, just like many politicians who just personally can't stand Trump still support him because they see him as a vehicle for getting things done that they believe in, right? To get things done, you often have to make common cause with people that you otherwise do not care for.
That worked. He also infamously was interviewed by Chris Matthews and asked about abortion. He said, well, we're going to have to punish the woman. And we want to outlaw abortion. And, we'll punish the doctor, we'll punish the woman. And he kind of had to think about it and say, well, yeah, we're going to have to punish the woman too. So it brought up the specter of, I don't think he necessarily wanted this, but it brought up the specter of executing women who commit abortion. He went there, and I think he felt that he had to go there to gain the Republicans' trust. Mike Pence was put forth as another way of achieving that. Mike Pence was only notable really due to his opposition to the bake the cake stuff and the Hobby Lobby stuff. That's where he came from. And so Trump went there. He pandered or tried to appeal to these people, but then they
yeah, no one really believes in paganism because paganism just gives you a any moral choice that you want, essentially. So people who are looking for divine guidance, right, they're going to choose belief in the one true God. They're not going to go for pagan alternatives. People who want transcendent divine connection, they're going to go for one true God or Abraham.
Embraced him more than anyone else. So if you look at various figures like me, for instance, I was off the Trump train maybe the earliest, but I don't know. And then, Ann Coulter. I don't really like Ann Coulter, to be honest, and I think all she wants is DeSantis. She just wants to go backwards and not forwards. But regardless, she's way off the Trump train. And the people who were off the Trump train at the beginning jumped on the Trump train. And so Ben Shapiro became in many ways, face of the Trump movement, at least in terms of the ideological online content.
So why do people jump on and off the Trump train? In large part, it depends on their social circle. Large part, it depends on pragmatic considerations. All right. If you're an evangelical Christian and you want evangelical Christianity to have power, then it makes sense you vote for Trump. If you think that America has a massive crime problem or a massive illegal immigration problem, then it makes sense that you vote for Trump. Right? Pragmatic.
And the people who remained absolutely devoted to him were the Christians. And by 2020, you have Paula White, his spiritual advisor, whatever the hell she was, speaking in tongues on the eve of his election. And weirdly calling forth voting blocks from Latin America. They're coming from Latin America. They're coming from Africa. We're here for Trump. In your name, Father, in your name.
Yeah, but is that any more ridiculous than the things people say when they're having sex or trying to have sex? There are other ways to get passionate, aside from sex. But I guess if you're pagan or secular or an atheist, probably sex is the closest you're going to have to a transcendental experience, to a transcendent experience. So, religious people usually have multiple avenues to the transcendent. And so these experiences all look ridiculous from the outside. There are many mysteries that you can only understand when you're inside the dance. Right? If I had to look at you, having sex, it would probably look very ridiculous to me.
You will destroy all enemies, destroy them. It was wild as hell. But on some level, all of that, look, the wall never really got built. It got built to some degree. Immigration was never truly reformed. It's definitely true that there were some serious kind of draconian measures implemented by Sessions and company. And COVID lessened immigration pretty substantially. All of that's true, but there was never really any like big solution to these issues offered by Trump. And it's ultimately kind of gone by the wayside. You don't hear people talk about the wall anymore, whatever. And it's just become a religion. Like the emergence of QAnon was probably, and I really hate it when I talk to some of these conservatives and they want to just deflect and deny and diminish the importance of this stuff. I mean, QAnon was one of the most important social phenomena of my lifetime. An online movement that motivated people to be fanatics, that is remarkable.
Wait. How is that different from Richard Spencer's movement? Wasn't it also an online movement that motivated people to be self-destructive, antisocial, and fanatical?
And, so it just emerged as this cult. And you can kind of see this coming up later. As I've said, I think Trump needed to kind of like be radical again, be crazy again. He's got to reignite the magic of 2015. And he can't. Maybe he's just played out. Maybe he's just taken too many shots at this point that he's on the mats, dazed and confused. He can't get up. That's probably true. No one's even talking about Trump at this point. And so you get this Yayism, which, waves the flag and evokes Americana and that type of stuff, but is ultimately just Christianity. And, I listened to a lot of the Gavin McInnes thing. I should probably listen to the whole thing. It just wasn't nearly as compelling as this wild Alex Jones interview that I listened to with rapt attention because it was so just absurd. But anyway, if there is a policy there with Yayism, it seems to be, we blame the Jews for the fact that porn is on the internet and we have indecent advertising and all that kind of stuff. We blame the Jews, but we can't really, kick the Jews out of these positions. So what we're going to do is have decency laws. And, how exactly that would play out, I don't know. But that's at least the kind of germ of an actual policy of Yayism. But
look, the policy of Yayism and the policy of QAnon, essentially, we're losing in the current system. Therefore, let's overthrow the current system. From a pragmatic basis, I think that's what it boils down to.
What's most prominent about Yayism is the fact that it is just pure Christianity.
No. To call Yayism pure Christianity is absurd. If Yayism was pure Christianity, you'd have all these Christian theologians and Christian clergy on board, and I'm unaware of any. Yayism is pure yay. It's just another opportunity for Kanye West to seize attention and to proclaim that he's cutting edge and that he's going to change the world. Yay is gay. Well, he certainly seems that way. Apparently, Milo and Ye fell out over one accusing the other of making a gay move.
To be fair, there is some policy there, more or less, but that's not the real thing. It's about calling out the Pharisees, reading the Bible, putting your faith in Jesus, loving everyone, especially Hitler. But isn't it interesting how populism, quote unquote, or all this stuff, it gets reduced to Christianity. And I think that's the general trajectory of this stuff. This just keeps happening over and over. You can even say the replacement of me with Nick Fuentes as the kind of icon / object of hatred of the online right. That also is very interesting because everyone knows that I'm secular at the very least. And also everyone knows that Nick is not. This is the long-term trajectory of things. And I guess the way to think about how do we explain this, I think this all comes in the context of a general decline in belief in God and religiosity in the United States. So as this is happening, the general religious belief is declining pretty significantly. And so I guess that I would suggest that it might be a kind of late reaction against this overwhelming trend. I mean, keep this in mind. The number of unchurched agnostics or atheists is at the same level as evangelical Christians in the Bush era. And so in 2022, the number of vaguely agnostic, who knows what they believe, is at the same level as the Bible-thumping flag wavers of 2004. So, like, objectively speaking, all of this stuff is declining. Yet, as it declines, it almost gets kind of reduced into something more intense. You know, it's like if you're...
But people want to feel something. Right? People want to feel alive. People want an adrenaline rush. People want a dopamine hit. And the successful religious, social, cultural leader, the successful live streamer helps people to feel something. And you want to, offer people a way to, feel alive. That, finally now they're living from the inside. Now they have the truth. Now they have the real stuff.
You're cooking a sauce, and you put some vinegar, Worcestershire, whatever, some kind of strong stuff. At the beginning, it's kind of like fairly weak, but you keep reducing it, boiling it down, and all the water goes away. So it's much less than it was, but it's kind of stronger. It's a true reduction. Yeah, as someone just mentioned, like, mysticism is on the rise. Like, no doubt. I mean, there's something to be said for the notion from, oh gosh, what's his name? British theologian Chesterton. He's not a theologian, he's kind of a journalist, actually, but you know what I mean. Chesterton, and to some degree, it's the kind of notion of Dostoevsky. It's like, when you don't have religion, when you don't have orthodox religion, you're just going to have crazy new religions. I do agree that. I think that is also on the rise. But Christianity in a recognizable form is simply declining. And belief in God is declining. Even people who believe in God believe in some, like, hazy entity in the sky who's nice. Whether they really believe in a Christian God is questionable, or a Jewish God. But as this declines, I think this will kind of get more intense. And the thing that kind of sparked off this for me this morning was I read this article in the New York Times about Indonesia, believe it or not, banning sex before marriage, banning cohabitation by unmarried couples.
Yeah, so you planning on any vacations to Indonesia? Right, sex outside of marriage is now banned. Sex outside of marriage is banned in Qatar. So I sure hope there isn't a bunch of fornicators in Qatar placing their well-being at risk, right? So this is just the more traditional perspective on life, being brought into secular law.
And other things. It's very interesting. Someone just asked, would Ye be open to Apolloism? I mean...
So also these are Muslim nations, and they do seem more medieval than Christian nations. I can't imagine a Christian nation passing a secular law banning sex outside of marriage.
Maybe I should send old Nick an email and say, or a text and say, hey man, let me talk to Ye. I don't know if it would work or not. Maybe worth doing. I don't know. I mean, he might be open to Apolloism in the sense that he's open to anything. He's a kind of artistic type. But let me go back to this. So I also think there's a kind of neo-trad revival which is occurring, which is very interesting to me because, in Indonesia, Indonesia was held up as the secular, good, liberal Muslim country. And now they've not exactly implemented Sharia law, but they've implemented a certain kind of fundamentalism that, at least for Americans, or at least for Americans not too long ago, it's just unthinkable. I mean, for better or for worse, and maybe mostly for worse, I don't know. But, when you're in your 20s, you're going to probably move in with your girlfriend. And something like that is now illegal. That is pretty remarkable. And as I've said, I've suggested this before, and I'm not positive about this. I'm kind of offering a little bit of a conspiracy theory, you could say, but I'm offering just a take on the Roe v. Wade decision. Now, millions, in fact, more than $1 billion were raised on behalf of...
Okay, so his perspective on the Roe v. Wade decision is that it's a way to force Americans to reproduce. Kind of recognizes that on their own they're just not going to get it done. So maybe with Roe v. Wade, they'll finally start reproducing.
Sure aren't. It would be unlikely to really benefit you. In fact, you'd likely be one of the casualties of it. Yeah, absolutely. This is an interesting issue. I think I was saying this last Thursday at some point where, the meme that's very popular on the dissident right, and particularly among like Tucker Carlson viewers and things like that, which is that strong men make good societies lead to weak men lead to bad societies. Hard times make strong men make good times make weak men make hard times make strong. And that's usually how it goes, right? Okay, I more or less agree with the sentiment of that. there's a little too much luxury in the world, and you become decadent and frivolous and weak and so on. And there's a kind of natural cycle where that leads to bad things, and it might ultimately lead to chaos, but out of that chaos, stronger people will arise. So I kind of get it. I agree with the essence of what they're saying. But what's kind of interesting is that, like, the people who share that meme are actually the ones who are going to bring about bad times. And what I mean by that is that, like, these so-called weak men that these guys rage against, they're raging against them from a resentment standpoint. Like, they're raging against them from a lower status. So,
yeah, I think this is a great point. All right, people who are losing in the current system want a revolution to change the system.
Yeah, they might not like the video gamers who are total losers, but when they say, like, weak men, they're talking about, like, the current Secretary of State or Biden's latest press secretary or an MSNBC commentator. So that's who they're raging against. And those people, whatever you want to say about them, like, I would agree with a lot of criticisms of them, but those people are actually actively managing the current system. And due to the fact that it's going and the mail gets delivered and your bank account isn't, miraculously emptied or something like this, they're doing a fairly good job. And it's actually these guys who share the strong men meme that are probably going to eventually end up attacking the system. So they're the ones that are actually going to bring it all down.
I think the deeper issue here is the people who are unhappy, people who are losing at life, people who are ineffective, are going to want to place the locus of their problems outside of themselves. So these people are much more vulnerable to believing in conspiracy theories, that they just want to place the blame for their frustration in life, their pain in life, on some entity outside themselves. So these people tend to be ineffective at life, they tend to be marginalized losers, and they tend to attach themselves to marginalized movements.
Yet they want to blame the weak men for this. It's just a thought, but, like, those, again, and the people sharing those memes aren't necessarily even the strong men. I mean, the people sharing those memes are, like, the guy who's a manager at Bed Bath & Beyond, but wants to be a horse trainer or a factory laborer or something, but kind of can't due to be fair, to situations outside of his control. So he's a kind of bourgeois LARPing as a proletariat or peasant. But it's those people who, again, are kind of, like, enraged against the current system and the current order. And it's those people who are going to bring it down. Whether it's like Jason.
Okay, I don't think they're going to bring it down. I think they're too ineffective to bring it down, but they can certainly create chaos. All right, so particularly in a disconnected, atomized society, marginalized losers, much more dangerous. They can commit crime, they can create social chaos. I don't think they're going to bring America down.
Or Yayism, or, just the kind of, like, aggressive stupidity you see in this, like, Tucker Carlson video about men, like, heating their balls and wrestling, and, like, those are the types of people who are just kind of, like, they feel like the world is beyond their control, and they're not invested in the elite, and they're raging against it as, like, it's feminine or it's weak or whatever, like, but they're raging against it always from a lower status. And those are going to actually be the people who bring it all down, for better and for worse.
Yeah, I understand the idea that they're, it's like a summary of Spengler's, like, civilizational elemental cycle.
Yeah.
But it's a summary, I suppose, of the concept, and not of the important parts. I mean, with what Spengler was talking about, even Nietzsche touched on this. When talking about sort of how, like, the greatest culture that ever, the greatest insofar as it contains sort of all the elements of Athens, had to occur while it was in a state of decline. Like, that was almost a necessary component.
So you notice that the average IQ of Richard Spencer's audience seems to be about 20 points higher than that of Nick Fuentes' audience.
Because the people were comfortable enough to start producing high culture, and they had achieved a sort of a hegemony that they had already done all the hard stuff, I suppose. So then they could start eating the fruits of their labor, but in so doing, they bring about a decline. But in Spengler, he talked about sort of like the process of urbanization and the disconnection of people from the land, and the idea that there's a cosmological element to that is lost, and therefore then there's a cohesiveness that is lost as the cultures start to, and he referred to more ancient ones, the development of all these different cults.
Yeah, what about people like Kanye who've been on the inside and then they switched to taking the populist position, right? So I think they feel undervalued by being on the inside. So Kanye was frustrated with the middleman. He was frustrated with the companies he was doing deals with. He thought he could do much better on his own. And so some people that live on the inside, live with the power brokers, they abide by the rules, and they just finally get tired of those restrictions, and they just want to blow things up. My dad was kind of like that. He was an influential Seventh-day Adventist theologian and evangelist, but got tired of living within the rules, wanted to challenge the Church's central doctrine, and then, like many before him, right, eventually got pushed out. So usually I think it's some kind of antisocial spasm. So yeah, Kanye West, Russell Brand, they've lived on the inside. Now they're willing to jeopardize all that to take on marginalized positions.
As opposed to a hierarchy of a cult from the state. That's like way past the point that I don't even think they're capable of talking about or willing to, even if they could. But it's interesting. I did read something a long time ago. It was near the start of the Syrian civil war. And it was about how the chaos that the rebels in different areas and all these different competing factions and the chaos that they had produced actually made made more firm the will of the people who were still under the government, who were living in the regions that were still controlled by Assad. And I remember someone said, this was an article, so they were speaking to someone, and it was like they weren't supporters of this Alawite minority. They weren't supporters of the president. They were hardly any of that, but that they wanted to live in a functioning state. Right. And I imagine that the rebels are sort of these people that you're talking about. They were approaching it, they're trying to attack the existing.
And I think this is the reason why the voters turned against Trump in 2018 and 2020, is they saw what he was doing as making the state less functional. And so if Trump had simply appeared competent with regard to COVID, probably would have easily won re-election.
System. Which it shouldn't necessarily never be attacked, but they are coming from a lower rung socially, and they probably share a lot, because we see these sort of Wahhabist elements amongst them. The Assad regime, Syria, for so many years has been too secular. It's been decadent. It's being ruled by these weird Alawite people. They're hardly Muslims, if at all, and we need to bring about this more. They probably see themselves as the strong men, but then they can't even work. Like they can't do the basic things in that hierarchy of needs. I forget the name of that.
Abraham Maslow.
You know what I'm talking about? I understand hierarchy. Yeah, you need food and shelter. Right. I can't remember the name of the theory. Yeah. At any rate, doesn't matter. But if you can't provide those basic things, it's like, well, yeah, you're the weak men creating the bad times.
Yeah. So the Biden administration has appeared more competent. I'm not saying they are more competent, but they certainly have appeared more competent. Probably helps having the media on your side.
Exactly. That's not good. It's perhaps you do have elements of a more I guess a more primitive strongman thing insofar as you're engaging in combat, you're fighting for a cause, but it's like toward what end? So if the goal is to create, is for strong men to create good times, yeah, you're doing the contrary. So.
Yes, exactly. Don't you think ISIS is kind of paradigmatic in all of this in so many ways? It's a fanatical revolt against the modern world, and the fact even that ISIS engaged online, ISIS was big on Twitter in say 2014, and they were engaging in this just kind of bizarre, hilarious type of stuff. You even saw this a little bit with the Taliban when they retook power. And don't you think that though ISIS, they are the strong men, and they are strong men to some degree. They're willing to die and sacrifice. They're willing to kill. I mean, they're badass, but they're paradigmatic in the sense that they're the men who are going to bring it all down. And there's no, I don't think ISIS is long-term, it's viable in the long term precisely for the reasons that you just outlined. They're not going to be able to provide, someone mentioned in the chat, Maslow, is that what it is? I've heard the hierarchy of needs, I've heard that many times. I'd be curious to look at it, read the origin of it. But yeah, you need to provide food and shelter and stability before we even start talking about the no sex before marriage stuff. So
Yeah, I think ISIS is paradigmatic in that. And, and I'm not saying this as like slander or something, but, there's a degree to which the Fuentes guys and, like, look at the people involved in this thing. And look, I do think Ye is very authentic. I think he means this. I think he kind of has an artistic mind and all this kind of stuff. But look at the people involved in this immediately. You have Fuentes, Ali, Akbar, Alexander, Owen Benjamin. Like, it kind of is white ISIS.
White ISIS.
And, I don't think they're going to...
That's a funny point, right? It's, okay, literally, factually not true. The Fuentes movement has anything in common with ISIS, except, yeah, they both are movements of revolt against modernity. They're pretty much all right-wing movements, movements to varying degrees of revolt against modernity. Didn't know until recently that Owen Benjamin was writing many of the jokes that Kanye West was using about Ben Shapiro. So what unites, Kanye West, Owen Benjamin, Nick Fuentes, and Ben Shapiro is a revolt against modernity. But there are varying degrees of revolt against modernity, right? Not everybody on the white right wants to overturn everything about modernity.
Engage in suicide bombings or something like this, but it has the same vibe or motive.
Okay, that's pretty funny. So yeah, Richard can definitely come with the compelling perspectives. So calling Fuentes and company white ISIS.
Are doing well.
Oh shoot! Go on. Just
Who are doing well, as the title of this might make him popular, but he's only going to prevent him from winning. He doesn't have any of them.
okay. It's some Richard Spencer's Twitter space.
And there's another aspect about Yayism that I think is very significant, which is that back in 2016, Trump was kind of a mainstream Republican at least, or he was being promoted by traditional Republican operatives. Roger Stone, for instance, and Geo Proud, a gay Republican group.
Okay, Roger Stone's not a typical GOP operative, right? Roger Stone's very much on the fringe.
At the time, working with CPAC, got his first speech at CPAC in, whenever it was.
Look, in politics, there are no permanent friends, there are no permanent alliances, all right? They're just interests which change over time. Yeah, Spencer indirectly compliments Nick Fuentes and company by calling them ISIS, which he calls badass.
Or something like this. And Trump hired some, not exactly the best and the brightest, but he hired some pretty traditional Republican aides, Corey Lewandowski, Katrina Pearson, idiots, but not alt-right people. And so the alt-right was always kind of tangential. It was riding the wave of Trump. And it was at most tangentially connected to it. What I see with Ye, and I think this is actually a huge problem, in fact, is that Yayism is fully operated by these certain alt-right people. Now, Nick Fuentes is the most obvious.
Yeah, Yayism is fully supported by the dysfunctional, right? By people who, generally speaking, are losing in the current system. Right? Yayism is not attracting the best and the brightest.
Because he's, hanging out with him, he's appearing alongside him on Alex Jones. But I think Nick Fuentes is actually kind of the least of Ye's problems. Nick Fuentes, look, I have very strong, profound disagreements with Nick Fuentes. And, you could call him a grifter. I guess everyone could be called a grifter on some level. But I actually do think that Nick is operating in good faith. I think he actually believes the Catholic stuff. And I think he believes in the nationals as well. And he kind of...
Look, whether or not someone's operating sincerely or authentically or in good faith doesn't really matter that much. Generally speaking, what matters is, whether they're aligned with your interests or not. Right? That Nick Fuentes is authentic and operating in good faith doesn't say anything about whether or not his ideas and his approach are going to be good or bad for you.
Together in his mind. But the other people surrounding Ye are...
And yeah, my position, in case it's not clear, is that Nick Fuentes, Kanye West, Milo Yiannopoulos, Owen Benjamin, they're good for you to the extent you treat them as entertainment, all right? Richard Spencer, entertainment, all right? They're bad for you when you start taking them as oracles of truth. So there's tremendous, entertainment and human drama, and even things to learn from these fringe characters. But they're terrible examples for how to model your life.
I would say far worse than Fuentes. Because whatever you want to say, again, I do think that Fuentes is operating in this, not necessarily to win, but to promote himself and his ideas. But that's kind of, you see it. But the Ali Akbar is fully embedded with the campaign. Milo resigned. Who knows? There was probably some intrigue or drama behind that. But Milo was there at the beginning. And it's very easy to see that Milo has very bad intentions and that he might very well have been motivated, at least in part, to just...
So, Richard goes for this myth. They're just good guys and bad guys, right? If you can just get a fix on whether someone's a good guy or a bad guy. Well, we're different in different situations. We don't have one moral character. In some situations, we're going to be honest. In some situations, we're going to be brave. In other situations, we're going to be cowardly. In other situations, we're going to be diligent. In other situations, we're going to be slack and lazy, right? In some situations, we're going to be moral. And in other situations, we're going to be immoral. Right? So it's not like there's just some inevitable moral character that if you can just fix it, then you can get a good read on what's going on.
Annoy Trump or show him up or sabotage him, etc. Milo is a lying sociopath. Laura Loomer's there. Now, Laura Loomer, I probably would put closer to Fuentes. I do think she's more kind of what you see is what you get. But then you can kind of go, it's fully operational by these internet people. And I think there are some major problems with that. I think that's one of the reasons why Yayism will have a very difficult time getting off the ground and might kind of go up in flames. But it is what it is. But at the very least, it's very interesting that that's the case. Because he's not a Republican candidate like Trump was.
Now, the chat says that Ye is making his point very effectively. Yeah, he's making his point very effectively for a certain kind of audience, right? For another kind of audience, he's not making his point effectively. So it really depends on the level of learning, social status, how effective you are in life. How high is your IQ? Whether or not you're going to resonate with Kanye West's largely infantile analysis.
He is the internet candidate, pure internet candidate. And I think this is interesting, again, from the level of power dynamics. After the midterms in November 8th, or whatever they were, early November, all you heard about was DeSantis. Oh my God, this is the Trump who can win, this is the smart Trump. The mainstream loved him, let's get rid of Trump, let's go with DeSantis. Do you really hear about DeSantis anymore? I think he, much like Alex Jones, has been kind of broken by this. I think he's almost irrelevant. Even Trump himself is being rendered almost irrelevant by Yayism, because Yayism is so hot and so authentic. Trump can rant on Truth Social about how we should suspend the Constitution, and people don't pay it much mind, nor should they, to be honest. It just sounds stupid. And so all of that, after the midterms, I was saying, and after Trump gave his announcement address a week later, I was saying, being a mainstream Republican just really isn't going to work for Donald Trump.
Okay, that just seems absurd that Yayism is going to supersede Donald Trump, that Yayism is going to supersede the Republican Party, that Ron DeSantis is now passé because Kanye West had a compelling appearance on Alex Jones. Like, Richard is a lot of fun to listen to. He's very entertaining, he's very theatrical, but because he puts so much, because he's so conditioned to think theatrically, he gets carried away with equating that which is compelling with that which is important. And much of what is compelling is not important, and much of what is important is not compelling. So, Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump are by no means eclipsed by Kanye West. Kanye West is a freak show.
You can talk about the stock market being up, line go up back in 2019 or something. No one ultimately cares. That's not how he got elected. That's not why he developed a cult of personality. That's just ultimately not going to work for him.
It's a big part of why people get elected or don't get elected, whether or not they're better off or worse off under somebody's reign. So a rising stock market does fill people with more optimism.
And so one thing, say what you will about Ye, the fact that he's this like pure, like dissident right internet candidate, it's actually a powerful thing because I think it makes his competitors irrelevant. Now, I don't think Ye, excuse me, I keep calling him Ye. I'm combining Ye. I don't think Ye is going to run the Republican primary, and I don't ultimately think he can win. If I'm just being a pundit here, but he can be powerful, and if he sucks up all of the dark magic, I think that's actually going to directly affect the Republican outcome. Because at the end of the day, the Republicans actually need that stuff to win. Republican consultants and the establishment, they can tell themselves all day long that DeSantis is America's governor and he's so lovable and he's so smart or whatever. I hate to break it to them, but they are living in their own delusional world. There is a huge percentage of the country, much larger than the percentage that would be defined as a conservative activist, who dislike DeSantis and might even dislike him rather intensely. And he's associated with stuff they dislike or have contempt for. The Martha's Vineyard stunts, attacks against Disney, which have been apparently reversed over the past week, all this kind of stuff. He kind of has all the culture war baggage, which might make him popular, but is ultimately going to prevent him from winning. He doesn't have any of the magic, the dark magic.
So how much loyalty and how much dedication do you give to someone who's an unstable personality? Right? If you throw in with Kanye West, he's going to be all over the map. He's going to be up and down. He's not exactly someone you can rely on. So certain people are stable in those situations, and other people just seem to be incredibly unstable. And now the unstable can often have piercing insights, levels of honesty and authenticity that the stable can never touch. Right? It's like some people can be brilliant in one area or two areas, but you don't want them checking the engines before the plane takes off. So Kanye seems to me like a classic person who can be brilliant in certain areas, but not the type of stable personality you want checking the engine before the plane takes off.
And just on a personal level, he's just very unattractive. And the fact that conservatives can't see that maybe tells us something about themselves. But anyway.
Okay, that's some analysis from Richard Spencer's Twitter space on December 6th. And let's get a little bit more here from Richard and company.
It's not really, it's probably like an ancient country, but really most of that land was in Ukraine or Belarus.
Right.
It's really a novel country, much like America. So now you have these two very large nations of Europeans, newly settled, not much less history than, say, France or Germany, and much less, the different areas of Russia have far less cultural difference than the different areas of Germany. And America is mostly entirely homogenous. So like the two arms of Europe that kind of stretch right out, kind of attacking each other during the Cold War. Yeah. It's something very schizophrenic. I mean, it kind of goes back to, if you look at the last 2 centuries, I mean to ramble like this, but...
No.
You look at the last 2 centuries, from about the Congress of Vienna to about the fall of the Soviet Union, all of our philosophy was in German. And you saw, in the same way, during the Age of Enlightenment, all our philosophy was in French. And that kind of ended the French Revolution. But in German, it was different. There's different currents, the left and right. Of course, you have Das Kapital, all that on the left. And on the right, you had, Nietzsche going down, all that.
Yeah.
So it was almost like, instead of where, as during the French Revolution, all differences complement each other, during, the age of German philosophy, it was very at war and almost kind of really led this kind of destruction and revelry.
It ended up in the, actual division of Germany as well. Maybe kind of fitting in some ways. You had the Marxist half and maybe not quite the Nietzschean half, but you get the picture.
Yeah.
I totally. I mean, look, I remember one of my professors said the last battle between the old and young Hegelians occurred at Stalingrad. That actually generated shockwaves when I was studying Hegel. Very true.
I mean, ultimately, the difference between the left and the far left and the far right,
they just think in terms of national interest or something. They don't appreciate the degree to which the last battle between Hegelians occurred at Stalingrad. They don't understand that ideas have consequences.
No, and I think it's something about Americans. I once listened to Mencken, because he said that we don't understand the politics of consequences. We think nothing can hurt. So it's almost like a game, and I think it's so dangerous because, like you said a little bit before, on another space, that people are opening up boxes that they don't know what's going to come out of. And you see the Supreme Court almost implicitly endorsing the independent state legislature theory. I don't see how that doesn't lead to some kind of at least some kind of the Troubles type civil unrest. I mean, it would definitely in some kind of. You said something before. I said we're almost like the concert of Vienna. The concert of Europe, Metternich Europe, where it's don't really know what's coming next. We're just kind of sitting around waiting for something to happen.
I agree. No, very good comments.
Yeah, that's just my spiel. So keep going. That's yours.
Yeah. All right. Let's do one or two more, and then I'm going to call it a night and get some work done. I think. Okay. So, and you were very obsessed with getting on. Bill for Christ.
Hello. Yes, great to be speaking with you, Richard. So I have a couple quick questions for you on Ukraine. And I know that's something that we're both probably really interested in. But I'm sure you saw, I believe it was yesterday, President Zelensky banned the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. And he still allowed the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So what do you think is going to happen as a result of that?
I'm going to mute. Okay, I think I'm...
Okay, so I noticed, Tucker Carlson getting annoyed that, Zelensky's, cracking down on personal freedoms. But, I think this is what people do when they're at war. The United States reduced a lot of freedoms and rights when the U.S. was at war.
All these criticisms of Zelensky for banning the Communist Party and, controlling the airwaves during wartime. I mean, that's just an absolute necessity. The Russian Orthodox Church is a arm of the state. I mean, I don't think you could plausibly allow some kind of antagonistic entity within your borders particularly while you're fighting a war.
Yeah, good realistic analysis there from Richard Spencer. Even when Russia was the Soviet Union, right, the Russian Orthodox Church essentially, went along with the communist regime.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that's fair. I mean, if you're at war, you want to ban parties that are against you, and I don't see that as like super authoritarian or a bad thing or anything like that. But at the same time, I think that when you start to ban ideas, and like you were just talking about, it starts to, I think it sets a really bad precedent. Because, I mean, why should, I know we're looking at it from the perspective of the state of Ukraine, but if you look at it from the perspective of the people in Ukraine, why should they be forced to worship in one church rather than the other? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and look, Ukraine was genuinely divided. I mean, I think a lot of, maybe more is made over some of those election returns from 2014 or something where you just had this geographic distribution between Yanukovych and who was this? I forgot who he ran against. And when did he run? Was that in 2012? Or was 2014?
It was a while ago.
Yeah. I forgot who he ran against. I need to go read up on this, but you can see these geographic distributions, and you can even see kind of religious distributions as well, where Catholicism is leaning west, Russian Orthodoxy is leaning east, and the east of the country is leaning east or towards Yanukovych.
So what are my thoughts on Bitcoin? I came out very strongly against Bitcoin about 18 months ago, so I don't think it does the things that its boosters push. I think it's a scam that people get influence, they get a following, they talk people into investing, and I think it's a highly dubious operation. I think investing in cyber currencies is like the tulip mania that took over Holland back in the 17th century. I don't think that cyber currencies are particularly useful or a good investment. So highly skeptical, highly negative on Bitcoin and cyber currencies, and I've been that way for about 2 years.
I mean, maybe too much could be made of such things, but it is a real factor. And I don't know how to solve that issue, but if I were Zelensky, I would absolutely ban the Russian Orthodox Church. I mean, I can't believe it took him this long. And I would absolutely ban the Communist Party, for God's sake, and control the airwaves, and have nothing on the airwaves that is even conceivably demoralizing. Yeah. So therefore, no dissent or so on. I mean, again, it's kind of brutal, and we don't like this for good reason. But you when you enter a stage of an existential crisis, I mean, you can't. You're a football team, and you're in the huddle. You're like, "This is the play we're running," and then someone's like, "Well, what is a play really? And is this
Right. So when I'm running late, I'm a very different person. When I'm running late, I tend to treat people much more in a transactional way. When I'm running late, I'm much more likely to be rude, to be inconsiderate, to not be thoughtful or kind, right? So depending on the situation, I'm a completely different person. So too with a nation at war, all right? You're in a completely different situation, all sorts of rights, just going to have to go by the wayside when you're at war. And we saw with COVID, when we entered that extraordinary situation with COVID, all these rights which we thought were God-given and immutable, right? Just get taken away just like that. When the situation changes, individuals and nations have to change.
You're like, all right, get this guy off. We got to win, and you have to make a decision and understand that you're in a real serious situation. Banning ideas.
So I am in Manly, the northern part of Sydney, looking out at Sydney Harbour, and right in the middle of the screen right now, looking at Watson's Bay there. I'll move it a little bit towards the center right. That's Watson's Bay. To the left, right. This is Manly, and I got here on the ferry. You're seeing the ferries go by. It is currently 1:03 p.m. Friday afternoon here. It's about 78 degrees Celsius, about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius right now. It's summer vacation. Kids are largely out of school.
Look, all of these things can have bad consequences, but everything can have bad consequences. I don't think there's no reason to believe that Zelensky would have done this in peacetime. Okay, I am going to move on just because I am going to. So I'll get a few people. Let's keep everything quick. Yugi Muto, you've been raising your hand for a while. You have the floor. Go.
Okay, yeah. So I had a question about this whole Ye thing. Like, I think Ye is reasonably interesting. Yeah. Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, you're raising your hand, but you just need to speak.
So I'll make it quick. I have 2 points that I wanted to get your take on. One with Fuentes. I think it's useful to kind of get a look at the long game. We're looking at the whole Fuentes Kanye kind of thing. Everybody seems to have a kind of grasp on what's happening here. And with Kanye, we're witnessing kind of like the equivalent of a homeless dude taking a dump in front of people in public, whereby his depression is manifesting itself in the highest of EQ type of fashion that exists. And, you get this spark of creative madness that's going on with him in that way. And we all get to be entertained by it. And, that manifests in him or himself with Milo Fuentes. And, the Fuentes influence, I think the real important figure in this whole thing is Fuentes because, like I said, Kanye's just doing his thing. That'll fizzle out. That'll do what it does. His influence kind of matriculates down to Fuentes. And Fuentes is the real winner out of this, whereby he can be analogized, his influence can be analogized to a snowball. And the snowball will, of course, expand to the size relative to the abundance of snow in its immediate proximity. And, 1 sec, it might be rolling on a barren sidewalk with no snow. And that could be easily analogized to the last, 3 or 5 years when he's been mass banned across mass media, social media. And everyone's kind of had to pretend they don't know who he is. But more and more, it's becoming apparent that everyone will know who he is. Everyone does know who he is. They're just
there are problems to that. And in some ways, this is part of my own experience because, first off, CPAC knew who he was very early on, and he started getting banned from CPAC as, I don't know, maybe 2018, maybe certainly 2019, 2020.
Right.
And you can't make an excuse that you don't know who he is. So, he can have this Groyper army, and he can have friends like Ali Alexander or whatever, but that, you're in a very, if you want to be a political actor, you're in a very difficult situation. And so sometimes these things, I get the snowball analogy, of course, but sometimes these things can get big and go back. Look,
he won't merely have a snowball. He won't merely be a snowman by the time he's 35, 36 at the age to run. He's going to be a full-on avalanche by then. All Kanye's influence has done to him is just release density around this analogous snowball.
I agree with that to some extent. I'm trying not to be like anyone to accuse me of jealousy or something. How is all of this going to work?
It's counterproductive to even try to predict it. You don't even, smart businessmen don't forecast past 5 years for this reason, and it's even kind of dumb to forecast into 5 years for this reason. But I think politics is a little different.
Months.
Exactly. So with politics, though, I think it is
forecast 5 months.
Forecast 5 months for what? Business? But
No. Look, I get what you're saying. It's just kind of like you need to understand the difficulty of doing this. I would say that what Fuentes has going for him is that if you drop the Holocaust revisionism and overt racism, etc.,
he's in his 20s, though. That's the one thing he has going for him. So both of those things you just mentioned, and I think you cut out. I don't know what happened. But
I did cut out. Someone called me. Yeah. What Nick has going for him is that the way he articulates things is actually really attractive to a large part of the Republican base. Now, I'm not saying that Holocaust revisionism is attractive to them or that overt racism or, Catholic dictatorship or whatever, but he is a kind of hyper-conservative in a way that...
Chat says, even Richard Spencer was replaced by a cheaper Mexican migrant, Nick Fuentes.
I am, to make a obvious comparison, no. So,
well, it's fine that he does it, though. He's in his 20s. I'm telling you, he's in his 20s. He can get away with it.
He can't have his own fan base without the hyper-Catholicism and Holocaust revisionism and so on. So he's in a kind of tough bind. And
I don't know. I mean, like, I think there is going to be authentic, what Ye represents is real and authentic and powerful, but, it's easier. All this stuff is easier said than done. I mean, you're going to have to get actually pragmatic at some point. And
this is like the earlier caller said, when you watch a homeless man taking a dump on a public sidewalk, it's very authentic. It's very heartfelt. It could even be seen as powerful, but I don't think it's going to transform society. So,
and Fuentes, yes, is now a household name, but relying on a support base of his fans is difficult. Now, having a billionaire on your side, that's hugely powerful. But at the same time, I mean, I guess I'm a little more sober about these things now, a few days later. I mean, you could make a very strong case that this whole thing is headed for disaster.
Yeah, and actually, this is the last point. This is the second point, final point I was going to pitch to you on this, because I want to get your thoughts on. So that perfectly leads into it. With Donald Trump's recent kind of assertion of suspending the Constitution, I didn't even read the press release. Oh, by the way, Kirstie Alley just died. I don't know if anyone knows. That's big news right now. She just died. Okay. But anyway, that's a. But so
I remember Donald Trump. That was a fun show.
Yeah, definitely. Freaking It Takes Two. I think that's what I knew. Anyway. Back to the suspending of the Constitution. What I really think he's leading on here, what he really means is suspending liberties, which I think is, we have two historical examples of where that worked very well. One, Napoleon did it in France, leading up to his implementation to the rights of man, and it worked. He got France's new civil code in place while these suspensions were implemented. And among those suspensions were Jews were relegated down to certain professions. They couldn't participate in banking. They couldn't participate in, what was the other thing? Well, they couldn't participate in lending and usury, and they couldn't participate in, there's something else that might have even been medical. The other time it happened was here in the United States under John Adams, of course, with the Alienation and Sedition Act, whereby liberties were suspended and you couldn't talk shit about the government, or you were headed to jail. And you also, of course, you couldn't talk bad about the government. And then mass deportations were like, Madison had free reign to do that. Then of course Jefferson later pardoned everyone who was impugned under those legal steps. But these are 2 points in history where such measures did work, a suspension of liberties for the meantime, while maybe a convention of states is happening in this case. Like who knows what that would mean.
I think the MAGA people want this kind of stuff. He's not talking about suspending liberties. I mean, he wants to be elected president. I mean, let's not project something on him that's not there. And there's no question an effort going on among conservatives to, have a new constitution or something to the state legislatures, which they could legally do.
Yo, Big Spence, how's it going, man? So you can tell by my profile picture, it's Tony Tiger cooking crack, so I'm a big nigger proponent.
All right, back to this guy. John. Okay. Alberto, you can speak.
All right, yeah, internet and ideology, that guy really got me thinking, was William Luther Pierce actually an anti-Semite? Was George Lincoln Rockwell actually a racist? I'm not sure if he ever articulated that. Yeah, it just struck me
Yeah, so that was an earlier caller to Richard Spencer. Like, is Nick Fuentes really, an anti-Semite? Is he really, white nationalist? And Richard's like, are you kidding me? If you listen to anything from Nick? So yeah, William Luther Pierce was definitely.
He's a smart guy, and he's also he's very polite. I think he's good natured. But yeah, he gives a new definition to the word charitable reading of someone. I don't want to diss him actually, because he's very polite and he's clearly smart and good natured. So
yeah, but I feel like that's kind of the danger of like Nick Fuentes when Alex asked him if you're a white nationalist, and he just said with no hesitation, no. That was just the biggest lie I've heard in my life,
which was kind of a setup. But the thing is, what Alex Jones just wants to do is deflect everything. So he's like, you're not a Nazi like George Soros, who rounded up Jews and killed them. Like, everything is this just weird, it's not a serious point. And it's this weird way of deflecting so that, no one calls them Nazis. But the one thing that I appreciated about Kay, I keep calling him Kay. Gosh, I called him Kanye forever, and then now I've conflated him. The interesting thing about what Ye did is that he just kind of had none of it. Because he's like, are you a Nazi like George Soros? Did you kill 6 million Jews? Did you? And he's like, Alex, like...
So people who change their names all the time, like people who change their religion, they don't tend to be very stable people. Right? They tend to be high in, neurotic tendencies. So it doesn't mean that you can completely count them out or completely dismiss them. Obviously, I changed my religion. I also took on a Hebrew name, Levi ben Abraham. But generally speaking, name changes and religion changes are a sign of instability.
Hitler was cool, right? He just
just like blew away all of this just stupid conservative deflection. Yeah, there's almost like some like great thing.
Yeah, he gives them every opportunity to deflect, and well, you're not really a Nazi, right? No.
Yeah, a lot of people have tried to give Kanye West an out, from the self-destruction. Like, people over 30 tend to feel bad when other people self-destruct in front of them, and so people over 30 try to often throw them a lifeline, and that's what Alex Jones and Gavin McInnes are doing. So Gavin McInnes has this whole program where he wants to reframe Kanye West and point him in a more effective direction. But it looks like Kanye's just bent on self-destruction. So if someone's in the cave or someone's bent on self-destruction, you try to help them out, they will not be appreciative. They will bite you.
No, Hitler was cool. He did a lot of good stuff, man.
Right. He was really funded by the British, and the Nazis are in charge of the World Economic Forum. And it's just like, shut up. It's so dumb. Every conservative, it's like the essence of like middle intelligence, where you're too cute by half. You try to come up with some weird, just like obviously fraudulent, like overly complicated game, and people who are both less intelligent than you and more intelligent are just like, listen, man, just no, stop talking like this. This is absurd. And I don't think Alex Jones is a Nazi, to be frank. I think he actually is kind of. I think he comes out of the Ron Paul era, and I think he believes in all these conspiracy theories, like genuinely. But I think he also believes that we could go back to the Constitution, quote unquote, and that these things would just kind of vanish into thin air or something. That's how I would describe him. I genuinely don't think he's an actual National Socialist. I have no idea about Ye. I don't know him well enough, but I don't know. He's obviously fascinated by these things, but I don't think we really know enough about him to really.
Look, we know enough about Kanye West. He doesn't really have a thought through ideology, right? This is not a great intellectual, right? This guy's a rapper, right? He grunts and he emotes and he strings some rhymes together. He's not a political philosopher. He doesn't have a comprehensive ideology.
Really say, like, what would he actually do? What does he really want? You can't just keep telling people, go read the Bible. I don't think he was like paraphrasing Genesis 1 or something, and it's like, okay, yes, man, he created the man and woman, he created them. Okay, great. But like, what is your point? Like, what do you actually want? I don't know. I don't know if he's just fascinated by Jesus and Hitler as kind of like the ultimate historical celebrities at some level.
It's perfectly possible. Bowie did say Hitler was like the first rock star, but
and that's
Alex
true.
Jones, yeah, it is definitely.
The images of fans reacting to Hitler, including teenage girls, and fans reacting to the Beatles 20 years later, is remarkable. I'm definitely not the first one to point this out. He kind of was the first celebrity.
So what unites Kanye West and Milo Yiannopoulos, Nick Fuentes, and Gavin McInnes is a certain kind of celebrity. Right? It's not political ideology that's driving these people. It's the enjoyment of fame and the desire to expand your fame, and a fascination with other people who've been celebrities, who've been able to capture the imagination and the attention of millions of people. We now live in the attention economy. How do you grab attention? The easiest way is to be extreme, to say things that are considered socially unacceptable. Right? So in our secular society, about the only holy thing we have left, Richard made this point, is Hitler and the Nazis, because these are the ultimate in evil. And so in our homogenized secular society that's been robbed of the mystical, the magical, the transcendent, the divine, about the only magical thing we have left is the dark magic of the Nazis and Adolf Hitler, and so that attracts kind of rap kind of perverse kind of attention, and making a play for that, you are going to grab a lot of eyeballs. Yeah, so coming to you live from Manly in North Sydney, looking out now at Watson's Bay. Listening to Richard Spencer's Space.
He kind of was the first celebrity in that modern sense.
Yeah,
and maybe that's what resonates with Kanye.
Yeah, I remember
remember when you were on Alex Jones.
So yeah, a lot of live streamers, public personalities, rappers, just want to be famous, right? There's no cause greater than themselves, right? And I think that unites many of the people we're talking about here. It's not really anything they believe in greater than themselves. So how bad is the wind interfering with the sound quality? It's from Richard Spencer's Twitter Space, December 6th.
That was funny enough. That was a question he asked you. I think he said at one point, "Do you like Hitler?" And Kanye, you gave a smart deflection of, well, he was a figure from history. We can, and obviously Kanye had a completely different answer to that question.
Yes. Anyway, all right, guys. I'm sorry if I didn't get to you, but I am going to put a bookmark in this.
Okay, I'm going to put a bookmark in this. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.